Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of The Formula, where we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson, and I had the opportunity to sit down with artist, podcast host, and public speaker, Scotty Russell. Scotty is an exceptional artist at something called illustrative lettering, and if you check out his work over at perspective-collective.com, you can tell pretty quickly that this guy really enjoys lots of pizza. This was a fun episode for me, as Scotty is an authentic dude who you can tell he really enjoys what he's doing. In this episode, we break down how he got started as an artist, how other people can practice and get better at their art, how you can share your art online through Instagram and other sources, and really he gives me some advice. If you're anything like me, I'm a really bad artist, I'm not very good, and he kind of lays out, if I ever did decide to want to go down that path, how I could practice and get better over time. So without me rambling on any farther, let's get this thing rolling with Scotty Russell. Welcome to this week's episode of The Formula. This week's guest is artist Scotty Russell. Scotty, do you want to kick this thing off by telling a story of how you got started as an artist?
All right. What's going on? Thank you for having me. So how I got started as an artist. I can remember drawing way back to when I was a kid, especially like kindergarten. And the first thing I remember drawing was like this crazy scribbly green neon ball dragon. It was just like a dragon made of balls, dragon balls, man. And I remember that was like the coolest thing. I couldn't believe that I created that. And over the years, I kept drawing, but ironically, I kept it to myself because I got picked on and bullied a lot when I was growing up, beat up, and I didn't want me as an artist to fuel my bullies' ambitions to keep beating me up. So I didn't want to add fuel to their fire. So I drew and I kept it to myself, probably to the age of, I think I was 20. I didn't share it with anybody, just always kept a sketchbook with me. And my good buddy Tyson stumbled across my sketchbooks in college. He pretty much peer pressured me to post it on Facebook. And, that was kind of what broke the ice for me in sharing my art, sharing my creativity. And that's when I started claiming I was an artist. And now I try to encourage other people to share their work and get it out there because, it can make an impact on someone.
How difficult was that for you when you put your first piece out there?
It was absolutely terrifying because Facebook was kind of the big thing. Like, I think maybe it was only 3 years. Oh my God, I'm dating myself. I'm a dinosaur now. But it was scary because all my friends were on Facebook. I think maybe some of my family was starting to get on. It was before like parents and grandparents were on, back when it was like just for college kids. And, I knew a decent amount of people at school, and I always wanted people to like my artwork too. And so that scared me that someone might not like it and might not like me because of it. It was terrifying.
What type of response did you get once you released that piece?
To be honest, nothing much at first. And that's the thing. It's kind of comforting, is like not many people notice. People notice consistency. And when you keep posting things over time, if you just post something once in a while, nobody really noticed. So over time, people are like, oh man, I didn't know you draw. And I'm like, yeah, I'm art major, but yet I still did sports and football. So people only really saw like the jock side, and they didn't really see the creative side of things. And then I really embraced it once I graduated and realized football was no more.
Man, I have a lot of questions about that whole process of, because you said you kept it to yourself growing up, and you kind of released it when Facebook was fairly young. And I think that we're the same age, so we both must be dinosaurs.
We're dinosaurs, man. We're old as shit.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of our older listeners wouldn't agree, but I feel you on that. 'Cause it's like, man, Facebook's been around like 11, 12, I don't know, a long time.
Oh,
man.
Don't do it. I was on the MySpace days too. I was killing it on MySpace.
Yeah, let's not Google either of our MySpaces. How does that sound? So
Fine.
If someone is an artist and they're doing all this drawing, they're building their sketchbook, and they're suffering from some of the same fear that you had, maybe they're going through some bullying, what advice would you have to them to really push them to get their art out there?
I see it as what was a hard pill for me to swallow was that not everyone's going to love me and not everyone's going to love my work. And surely there's going to be people out there that hate me and hate my work. It's just a matter of time. But what I find comforting is that while there's going to be all these people that can hate you, that leaves plenty of other people in this world that can love you and love your work, and that your work is for them. And you have no idea who you're impacting, or you're just one swipe or scroll away from having your work completely change your life and possibly someone else's. So that's way encouraging to me, and that's why I want to push on to other people.
I think that makes a ton of sense. That's kind of my catchphrase to this whole thing that I'll probably end up repeating because I haven't broken myself of that habit. That makes a lot of sense, Scotty.
That makes sense that it would make sense to you.
It's one of the things that I find really interesting is when you create something, you are almost, I feel like a lot of people go out there and they're like, I'm going to make this thing and everybody's going to like it. But it almost sounds like what you're saying is you're almost like, I don't know if picking your audience is the right word, because you're going to make your thing, and the people who like your thing are going to like it, and the people that don't are not. I don't know why I'm thinking of like picking your audience, but are you following my logic on that?
In a sense, it's either, I think it's either you're creating for yourself or you're trying to create for other people and please the masses, and that's what I used to do. And that got me into trouble. And so I want to call it, I got this actually from Chuck Means, this saying of stay in your own lane. And then it kind of took on a whole new world of its own for me with some context around it. But so I want to encourage people to stay in your own lane, create work that you think is dope, that's from you, from an authentic place that means something to you, and pour into the context, your own DNA, your experiences, pour yourself into your work, and over time, that's what is going to attract people to your work. So instead of trying to create something that you think or people get a like and then be crushed when you don't get that engagement or the responses or the likes, the affirmations that you thought you were getting, trying to create with the trend, create for yourself, create from a true place and stay in your own lane.
Yeah, how do you recognize what your lane is, or how do you know that that is your thing?
I think it takes a lot of work and a lot of shitty work and a lot of experimentation and trying to find yourself in the work. I find things in the past, like someone that I look up to is Andy J. Miller from the Creative Pep Talk podcast. And I had a call with him not too long ago, and basically he's looking through my work and he's like, I want to see more of you within your work. You know, what are some of the things that you felt in the past that made you feel something, some type of emotion, and create work from that place.
So when this guy was telling you to be the most authentic version of yourself, or to think of something that really meant something to you or made you feel something when you saw it, what types of changes or things did you do to make that more of a reality?
Well, he really made me kind of look more inward, introspective, and look for those moments where, something made me feel something, whether it was sad, angry, happy, whatever, and then try to create work from that feeling. And oddly enough, he had me make a Pinterest board of looking everything in the past from young all the way up and pull all these different things that made me feel something growing up, like certain patterns or, Power Rangers back in the day, or like crazy different logos on cereal boxes or on soda cans, or movies that made me feel something. And then I tried to create work from that. So I'm big into sports, and I like personal development too. So I try to come up with ways, like a podcast episode is stay in the game, keep showing up, keep putting out your best work. And, sports played a big role in my life. So I created work that kind of reflected that and then tied in a message. So this was, for me, it resonated with me, but at the same time, it can hit home with someone else, especially if they're into sports or they needed a pick me up that day. So I created it for me, from my personal experiences, from things that made me feel something. And I think that's what people need to do, and pour into their work and share it. I mean, be vulnerable. It's okay.
Do you have a favorite piece or something you can think of that really resonates with you when you think of something that makes you feel?
Yes. I have a piece called Change Your Perspective. And I started off, it was like the first piece I had, I'd say about 4 years ago, when I became obsessed with hand lettering. And I was going through some weird times out of college, very depressed moments. And I was very narrow-minded, looking to get into fights, very a victim of my circumstances. And I went to a festival, ironically enough, not a Creative South, that's a conference. I went to Electric Forest, and it massively shifted how I saw the world, how, I interacted with people. And I came back with this idea of, man, I really changed my perspective. And I drew that piece up. It was the first piece that I've ever gotten featured on some type of Instagram lettering account, because there's huge accounts out there that feature your work, and that's how you build an audience. And I redrew it 2 years later, and now 2 years later, I'm thinking I need to redraw it again, because I see some instances that we need fixed to an untrained eye, but to a trained eye, they really stand out. But that piece is really special to me.
I kind of want to ask what happened at the, you said it was Electric Forest?
Electric Forest, yeah, it's a massive festival in Rothbury, Michigan. And honestly, just being around, it might be like 100,000 people. And I've never been around that. And there were I'm from Waterloo, and I grew up with a lot of tension around me and violence around me. And, people didn't always treat each other nicely. And being here with hundreds and thousands of people, and everybody's just kind of on this one wavelength, and, good vibes and high-fiving, and people of different skin color. It was just a huge melting pot. And I left there just like, wow, these people all had a great time. We all accepted each other. And I'm like, wow, why can't I be like that and show that in my artwork? And so I began to kind of put out more encouraging artwork and hand lettering that dealt with it, and some type of illustration to, mesh with it too, just kind of make a more impactful narrative.
How long ago was that where you had that experience?
I want to say it was like 2010 or 2011. So
6-7 years.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah.
I'm starting to date it a little bit.
Yeah, maybe 6. I don't know. I wasn't planning that question, so that one kind of came out of nowhere.
No worries. So when you put out a lot of these pieces of art, I'm sure that there's been some that haven't gone over as well as others. Do you have like either a favorite, failure or rejection story that you that maybe you learned a couple valuable lessons from?
Honestly, I'd probably say 70% of the work that I'm stoked to put out doesn't get like engagement or catch a pulse. And it used to fuck with me. I used to put all my eggs in a basket thinking like this is what people wanted to see. I got back into that people pleasing mentality. So I had to remind myself that you are not pizza. You can't make everyone happy. You are not pizza, because everybody likes pizza. And I thought that my work needed to please everyone. And so now I have to remind myself I stay in my own lane. I create work that I think is dope. And if someone resonates with it, that's awesome. And if no one doesn't, that's cool, because I had a kick-ass time creating it and it meant something to me. So that helps me kind of disconnect if things don't perform. But if I'm not getting huge engagement, I might get like one little message or an email from saying something like, hey, this piece meant a lot to me, or this episode meant a lot to me, even though the numbers didn't reflect that it reached a lot of people. Maybe it hits one person, and then that makes it all worth it at the end of the day.
It's almost like you have to almost fall in love with the process.
That's totally it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the product, but the process is where I lose myself. Like that's therapy to me.
So what do you do when you put something out there and you don't get the engagement that you want, or when you face any type of rejection or adversity? Do you have a process or something that you do personally to work through that?
Really, I just shake it off. It used to bother me, but now I know it's just part of the game. Things change. Social media is always changing. Algorithms are always changing. So I still keep creating, and I keep doing what I do best, and that's drawing. So I'm just right back to the drawing board. It's like football, go to the next play. Go to the next play. So if something happens, I fumbled in sports, or, I dropped the ball, I dropped the pass because I played wide receiver and kick and punt returner. And if I screwed up, I can always come back to the next play. Right. And that's how I approach my drawings.
So as you're sitting down to, work on a piece of art, what do you do to kind of get yourself, for lack of a better term, like get in the zone or get in the right headspace in order to be creative?
To really get me in the zone, honestly, I usually start things off with some thumbnails. I used to thrive in creative chaos and clutter, but now my wife is really clean. I like to have a clean environment. I like to be organized. I like to have space so I can push my pens and pencils or whatever around as needed. But everything starts off with just some thumbnails, trying to get the creative juices flowing, I guess, get the mind working. And once in a while, I might have a beer with it too, just to really relax and loosen up. But it usually just starts off with just quick little hand exercises and kind of brain dumping whatever idea comes up first, whether this is for client work or whether it's for, podcast episode artwork or some other type of project I'm working on. It usually just starts off small and just letting the ideas flow without thinking, just kind of losing all control.
It's almost like the concept of shitty first draft, so you just kind of have to get that first.
Exactly. Like nothing ever turns out pretty right away for me. Like that rarely ever happens. It always starts off as garbage, quick little scribbles.
Right. I'm waiting to get past the scribbling point. I'm still in the scribbling phase. I haven't quite practiced enough to get to be any good at it yet.
I can give you some tips if you really want to get past it.
All right, where would I start?
Do it every day, multiple times a day, and take drawing courses or some type of lettering course. That always helps as well. But having something that you're trying to work towards.
Do you find that you said something about having like a clean workspace? And I recently read something. It was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, or I'm probably mispronouncing the name. But she talks about how like having clutter and stuff or a mess or whatever is a representation of like your mental headspace or whatever you want to call it, like your mental clarity, your ability to be creative, all that stuff. And once you kind of unclutter your space, all of a sudden now you're like, you can think much more clearly. Your work becomes better. Do you find that to be true?
Honestly, yeah, because I kind of grew up in a mess, and I grew up as a very cluttered individual, and I really didn't start finding my groove until like when I hit 25 or 26 and really started putting myself into my art. And I've been living with my wife for a while now. She's super clean, and it's a good thing for me. It's kind of the yin and yang, and I'm super outgoing, and I push her to like be a little more extroverted at times, and she pushes me to be a little bit more organized and clean. And I feel like my art has been progressing the more I keep building these what would you say, in my routine. I got to build it in my routine to just keep tidying up, put my office back together so I can wake up early, come in the morning, and get right to work and not feel like I'm just in a mess.
Right. And if you're anything like me, it's like, oh well, I got to clean up quick and then I'll get to the work, or I got to do this first, or I got to put that away. And then once that's not an option, you're just kind of like, oh shit, now I actually have to do something.
Mm-hmm. But I at least it's in my routine. Like I try to plan my next day at night, and then I try to just pick up my office so I can just come in the morning. I marinate on what I'm supposed to get done the next day. I try to plan one big thing a day, which can multiply or turn into a 2 or 3 if I get that done quickly. But just having that plan going into the next day and having just a tidy little workspace so I can come down and just murder whatever it is, that's huge for me. And I found that's how I thrive the most.
If I'm attempting to be an artist or an amateur artist, I've got my space clean. I'm drawing every day. What's next? Or I'm taking some classes too. I didn't forget about the classes.
It's how badly do you want it? Like, are you wanting to become an artist, or you just wanted to be an amateur who can say he knows how to draw a little bit and can post some shit on Instagram? I think there's got to be something that you're working towards, some kind of goal. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with your work or your art? Are you trying to become a freelancer? Are you trying to become someone who can monetize off their craft?
Yeah,
that's what I would question first. Like, what's your why?
How do you know when it's time to to start monetizing or to really take it up to the next level instead of just kind of posting pictures for your friends and family to see?
I think when you get some validation. So in the beginning, it started with me just drawing out there, and Instagram really helped me out get that validation and, getting random requests for people I don't know who want to hire me for like a logo or some custom art. Once I started getting that pulse, then I knew I was kind of headed in the right direction. My little creative intuition was trying to nudge me to this artist I'm supposed to become. And, getting some of that validation is also addicting, and it kind of sets a fire under your ass. You become a little bit obsessed, like, damn, so this worked. How can I put in a little more extra time, and what resource can I find to like boost my lettering skills, or I want to get better at script, so cursive. So I bought this book, and now I'm getting hired to do script logos or script designs for someone. So that's, I think, getting that validation and knowing you're going in the right direction. But again, you got to practice, you got to put in the work, be consistent, you got to share that shit, and be open to critiques and criticisms, and don't be offended if someone doesn't think your work's good, especially if they're just trying to help you. I mean, fuck a troll, that's not that's not serving anybody. But if someone's trying to give you legit feedback, like that's crucial. Like, I would be nowhere without feedback.
I'm just thinking about right now of like, when I released my first couple podcast episodes, and like deep down I was like, oh, these are not like top of the line podcast episodes.
And nobody notices in the beginning. Like, they really don't. And something I got from an old friend of mine, Sean McKay, was people don't notice announcements. So, I mean, if you put out an announcement that you've done a podcast and it's like 3 months later, people still probably won't notice it, but they notice consistency. So when you've done it for a full year, you've done it for 2 years, and you've been showing up every day and putting something out once a week minimum, and, you know, pushing it, sharing it, promoting it, and getting it out there, that's when people start taking notice. So if they don't notice announcements, they notice consistency. And that's been key for me.
I feel like that belongs on a poster somewhere for some reason.
I wish I thought of it. It's so true, though. It's so relevant, but it's the truth. Like, people won't notice if you're just doing something once a month and then you quit because, you know, you weren't getting that validation. I mean, that's on you. You know, you didn't put the time in. You didn't want it bad enough.
What do you say to, I'm sure you get a lot of artists that come up and ask you for advice all the time on how to do what you do, promote the way you do, draw the way you do, create art like you do. What advice do you have to those artists that are, you know, they're committed, they're getting validation, and really right now they're just in like the day-to-day, for lack of a better term, grind of creating and sharing and being consistent?
I would say be intentional about it. I'm a huge believer in side projects. Like, Perspective Collective was a side project. This podcast is a side project. I know people who've blown the fuck up by starting a side project. Like, one of my buddies did a lettering piece. He did the 365-day challenge, and he ended up extending that to 540 days of drawing a word every day. And he was horrible at first. It's my buddy Bob Ewing. I talk about him all the time. But now he's one of the most renowned lettering artists out there. He's doing logos for conferences. Like, his stuff is plastered all over the marketing. He's doing amazing custom work and teaching workshops all over the place. And it's because it started off with a side project. I know people who did 30-day projects or 100-day projects, or like right now going on is Inktober. And there's a daily prompt. And you can do with the prompt, or you can just challenge yourself to draw every day in October and do some kind of side project out of it. A photography project, a ceramics, a pottery, you know, anything that is interesting to you, and then market the shit out of it.
So my form of art is writing, right? I'm not very talented, or at least I haven't put the work in on the, the pen and paper type of artistic stuff, but I do a lot of these like writing prompt workbooks and stuff like that. I usually try to do 1 or 2 a day. So if I approached you as an artist and was like, hey, Scotty, you know, I do this every day, your suggestion to me would be then somehow take the writing prompts or the stuff that I'm creating, and then push it out, right?
Right. You're right. No, what are you writing about? Like, is there a certain theme? Maybe write 10 different things over the next 10 days or over the next couple weeks and make a series of 10. Maybe it can turn into a short story. Maybe you can then push that as an ebook. Maybe that can go out as a newsletter, you know, a drip campaign or something that at the end of this, they can purchase it all, or maybe you then repurpose it into an audio format, or maybe you just package up the prompts from there. So there's so many different ways that you can take this side project or idea and then flip it of how can this stretch and provide more value to people in different ways. You know, instead of them just reading it, how can you then package it up, or how can you share the process behind it? So there's so many ways that you can repurpose your content for what you're doing. Just, you got to have a plan, and you just got to experiment.
Yeah, I love
finish and follow through.
Which is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people face, is actually, like, it's easy to start, it's hard to finish. It really is.
See, I think it's hard to start for some people because they're paralyzed by perfection. But then if they don't get the validation when they finally start, it's just as hard to persevere and stick with it. So I think both are extremely hard.
Yeah. Yeah, when you put it like that, it's like, oh man, I've been doing this for 100 days and I'm averaging 7 likes, and I have gotten 0 comments. That would make it very challenging to keep going. But I think that pushing through those times are what really, you know, that's how you kind of, in my mind at least, that's how you earn it. That's how you...
Yeah, intent. Like, especially, I mean, if nobody's paying attention, like, how can you become better as you go? Like, go read a book, go watch a series. If you're, like, for me, it took me forever to start a podcast. It took me like 4 or 5 months until I nutted up and did it. And then, you know, it wasn't getting any listens in the first 4 months. And, you know, I started studying more YouTube videos, or reading courses, or reading articles, or listening to podcasts about podcasts, and started putting other things out there, tweaking things, SEO on my blog post. And, you know, then I started having guests on, and that really helped. But it was just, it's a slow climb, and hopefully this climb never stops. I never want to fully arrive. It's fun to just chase down something all the time and see that progress.
And it sounds like you've jumped into multiple areas because of your artwork too, where, you're doing some public speaking now as well as the podcast. So, I feel like you got a lot of mountains in front of you that you can continually climb.
I'm a big believer in doing the shit that scares you, because I feel like that's where you're able to provide the most powerful value to the world, I guess, if we're talking like big picture here. But I grew up my whole life terrified, and I was so sheltered and lived in a shell and lived in my own bubble. I was scared to do things because I didn't want that feeling of uncomfortable. I didn't want to be uncomfortable. And now when I do the things that make me uncomfortable, I started sharing my art, and that was huge for me. And then I didn't want to just be this polished drawing on Instagram. I thought I had more to that. I had more to give. And so I started blogging, and then I wasn't a writer, but I wanted to start teaching what I know and start, encouraging other creatives. I wanted to create something that I wish that I had to encourage me those 3 years out of college, where I was just a fuck up and a lost soul and alone in the center of the universe. And, that's what I try to do. I go after the things that scare me, and then blogging turned into public speaking, and then public speaking went well that it turned into the podcast now. So I'm finding those things that terrify me.
What's the next thing that you're going to tackle that you're scared of right now?
I want to do video so badly, and it scares me, but I've reached the capacity of time that I have in a week outside a day job, outside the podcast, outside freelance, trying to be a kick-ass dad to my 2 little kitties and be there for my wife and be there for my friends and family. So I'm trying to find things to kill so I can get to what's next. It's like I want it. It's just the capacity isn't there yet.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm searching for. I'm trying to get just back to weekly right now, because I did weekly for a year, and I had to take like every other week for a couple months just for all the travel, speaking, and freelance projects I picked up. So I got to get to that first.
Right.
But that is what scares me, is video.
How far do you think you are away from being full-time on all of your side projects? Well, for lack of a better term, side projects.
I have no idea. I went to a private school. I was very naive about student loans. And so, kind of working with a burden, trying to draw my way out of some debt right now. So I do have some restrictions. But someday, if I keep trucking along, putting out good work, getting bigger freelance clients as things move along, and maybe sometime monetizing the podcast, I don't want to sell out. Like, I love it where it's at right now. I love it slowly growing, go grassroots format, and it'll happen when it happens. I'm not going to force it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. Some people, well, I might be looking in the mirror on this one, jump in a little too early on some projects and put a lot of pressure on them, which maybe can hurt them a little bit, because you're like, I have to have this thing go. And that can be a good thing sometimes, but it can also kill something that's not ready for that.
Exactly. So it's good to be ambitious, but putting so much pressure on yourself to achieve this goal, like set big goals. If you're not scared of it, then, you got to be scared of this stuff, set something you're scared of. But also there's an element of being realistic and having this crazy ambitious goal with no like steps or plans behind it and no way to actually reach it. Like, you're just setting yourself up for defeat.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've walked that path before, and it's not the most fun. So for whoever's listening out there, maybe start it as a side hustle, get some validation.
Everything starts with a side project. Do a side project. I can't recommend it enough. I've seen it work for me, and I've seen it work for so many other creatives. The wildest ideas, and then self-promote yourself. Learn social media. Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah, it's like having that growth mindset to know that you can learn how to do this if other people are doing it.
Exactly.
It's going to probably be a little painful at first. It's probably going to suck a little bit, but eventually you'll figure it out.
Well, and we get so tripped up in comparison, and there's an amazing quote by John Acuff, don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. And that always tripped me up, was like, oh my God, my podcast is not going to be at Andy J. Miller's Pep Talk podcast. But I mean, we all start from shit. Like, it takes a lot of shitty work to get to your best work, whether it's in art or whatever the craft is, whether you're a freaking quilter, like your first quilt is going to be garbage. But when you get to that 50th quilt, like, you might be slanging and selling those quilts to every old lady at the nursing home and just making mad cheddar. Who knows?
Slanging quilts and making mad cheddar. Those are a couple of things I'd never thought I'd hear in the same sentence. Is that your next leap? Is that what you're going to be doing once you go full time?
I can draw a quilt, but I won't quilt a quilt.
Sounds like you might have some limiting beliefs there. I don't know.
That's not what I want to do. Nope.
I know.
Nope.
I'm just giving you a hard time. So let's talk about the podcast a little bit, because I've listened to some of the episodes. I really like what you're doing. I find it to be really inspirational, especially when I was first starting this one. I felt like, I know you said you were embarrassed by episode number 1, but I felt it to really hit home for me. Why?
1 through 11. 1 through 11. Don't listen to them.
All right, I'm going to post them all up once we. No, I won't do that to you. Why did you start the podcast?
I started the podcast, again, it kind of was just an extension of wanting to become more than just a polished Instagram post. So like the writing, the public speaking, and people were like, wow, you really make an impact with your words. And like I have a coaching background. Like I coached college and football after I got injured, and then I did some coaching in high school, my alma mater, when I graduated. Like I always had some type of leadership role with like a captain or something. So like I always was here to try and pick people up, and that can't always reflect through writing, like the tone of voice and things. And it scared me too. And I had people pushing me to do it. And, you know, finally I'm just like, fuck it. I'm just going to try it. I realize that nobody's probably going to listen. So I have plenty of attempts to screw up, and I screw up every week. Like I allow myself to fail, and fail fast as hell, so I can continue to improve. But the podcast is really, honestly, it's helping me find my voice. It helps me talk about a lot of things that maybe I'm struggling with, that I know people in my audience are struggling with, like comparison, or, you know, feeling invisible at times, like no one's paying attention to your work, or dealing with anxiety as a creative. My next episode 50, I have people come on that really make the tie between mental health, anxiety, depression, and creativity. And like those, I want to have the hard conversations.
Yeah, those are tough topics to tackle, though, too, in creativity, because that stuff can be paralyzing. Because you can make all the stuff in the world, but if in private, but if you're dealing with anxiety, it's probably a nightmare to put that stuff out there.
Yeah, I think that's what held me back for so long. But really, the whole goal of it is like I work a full-time job, and a lot of people in the audience, the main question I get on like my onboarding newsletter is, how do I handle having a day job and then starting or sticking with some type of side hustle or side project? And so basically the podcast exists to encourage creatives to carve out time to build something for themselves, build something that's your own. You know, most of us, I'm sure, work a day job where we're building someone else's dream, where we're exchanging a paycheck to make someone else's dream happen. And I want to encourage you to, what's that weird idea that you wanted to do, or something that you've always wanted to do? Like, why can't you do it? Why can't you just put in an hour a day and chip away at building something for yourself? Even if it doesn't become your full-time job, like everybody needs some type of creative outlet or something they can pour themselves into that fulfills them. And that's what the podcast basically serves, is to encourage people to build something. You know, make that time, carve out time in the day. Like we all have the same amount of time in the day. And the reason why people get something done over than you is because they're not making excuses, and they make time to do that shit.
If it's important enough to you, have you seen any of the videos by Jocko Willink? Can't pronounce his name. I'm butchering it. I hope Jocko doesn't hear this. He wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, and he makes all these YouTube videos. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. And one of the things, he'll take like Twitter questions, and they'll be like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And one of his main answers is like, you know, if it's important enough for you to do it, you will find a way to get it done. Like you will make time to get it done. So if you're not doing it, maybe you need to ask yourself why you feel like you need to do it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. You got to be fully invested. If you say you want to do it, prove it. Like anybody can talk.
Yeah, yeah, now I'm just having flashbacks to when I was younger, and I'd be like, I'm going to do all this cool stuff, and then
I'm talking to myself too, and then I get pissed and defeated. It's like, man, nothing's taken off in my life, and why do I even try it? It's like I'm not putting in the effort, I'm not making the time to like make something grow.
Yeah, but then once you start putting in the time, then all of a sudden you're like, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but you start to see progress, and then you feel pretty good about it.
Well, and it's one of those things too, that if you find something you wanted to do, and like you're maybe a month or two in it, or maybe you're 10 days into it, and you realize that, man, this fucking sucks. You know, progress is progress. So starting something that maybe scared or piqued your interest, something to experiment, dip your toes in the water. And if you find out it's not for you, that's progress. Now you can move towards the next thing. What is it? Thomas Edison, took him 10,000 attempts to get the light bulb right. So each failed attempt was just another way leading him to the right way to do something. And I feel like as creatives or whatever you do in life, you finding these shitty jobs, you'll learn something from them. And then you can take that to the next attempt to find the thing that's your fit. And for me, I've done pretty much anything you can think of: t-shirts, logos, tattoos for people. None of it stuck. And now, creating lettering and illustrations and doing a podcast, that seems to be what sticks at this point in my life, during this season of my life, and what's making an impact. So I don't know what it's going to evolve to, but I keep it open. I let my intuition kind of nudge me where I'm supposed to go. And it's just my job to see those signs and, see what I'm supposed to do, or
Right.
experiment and let it happen.
What do you think that the biggest lessons that you've learned from the podcast are so far?
Let's talk in metaphor terms, especially because I like pizza. I think this is true for me in the podcast. I remind myself every day with my art and with anything in life, is that stop acting like I'm pizza. For real, this means a lot to me. Is you're not pizza. You can't make everyone happy. And so that was hard to get over with the podcast and everything else. But I realized that as long as I'm creating something that pleases me, that's first important, or that's most important. And, it'll eventually be for that one person who hears it. It'll find that right person at the right time. So make it for myself first, and don't expect everyone to love it, because it's going to be crushing when someone doesn't.
Man, all this stuff is hitting home as someone who's been spending a lot of time creating with the podcast, and it's like, you want to put your best stuff out there, but you just got to be yourself. There's already enough other people out there. You gotta do it for you.
Exactly, and you can't get caught up in perfection, because not putting something out there because it's not 100% to you, that's going to rob you from improvement and finding your thing and finding what your niche is in the world. And your 80, your 70, your 80, your 90% is always better than someone's 0. And those people that are putting in 70% on a podcast or on a blog post or in their photography game, those are the people that are going to grow way quicker than the person who's just like, that sucks, so I could do way better, but I'm not doing shit. So like, those people who think they could do better than everyone else and they're not doing anything, don't even give those people the time of day. Those are just trolls, and they want to bring you down because they're too scared to start and they don't have the courage to be scrutinized.
It's like, where's thank you for your input, but where's your
Exactly.
where's your artwork? Where's your podcast?
Done, not perfect.
Yeah.
Done, not perfect.
Right. Yep, I think you should just start making motivational posters, man. There's some previous guests that said some awesome stuff too. You could just knock those out and probably make a pretty good living just from an e-commerce site or something.
Too many people doing that already in my field.
It could be another side hustle.
Cats and pizza seem to be like the most popular things in my world. So that brings in the most money, oddly enough.
That's awesome. Are you gonna mesh the two, make like a cat pizza or something, or pizza cat, or have you
I already
done
have.
that? What?
Yeah. Coffee mugs. I got one right up there. So like, that's been the best seller.
Oh,
Anything cat and pizza related has been a hit, and everything else I've ever done that I put a lot of time into hasn't. It flopped with a motivational message. Never went anywhere. So, yeah.
So the secret to your success is merging cats and pizza, is what you're saying.
2 things I'm passionate about. Weirdly enough, I enjoy doing, and then, do things you're good at, do something that you enjoy, and then find a market for it. Those 3 things, and I think that's how people can be successful.
Yeah. So what's next for you? We've talked about everything else. What else? What's coming up next for you?
I really want to scale the podcast. I think it helps me a lot. It's making an impact on other creatives from what I hear, and I find the most fulfillment in that. So focusing on building that, scaling that, pouring 80% of my time into that, maybe 20% of my time into freelance, because I do like creating, but things like murals or, pulling more mural projects, kind of cutting back on some of the smaller things and saying yes to the hell yes opportunities instead of just the okay opportunities. Yeah. And that'll free me up for the podcast. That's most important to me right now.
Yeah, that hell yes or no concept too is pretty powerful.
Hell yes or hell no. If it's not a hell yes, then it's an automatic no.
Yeah.
And that's huge for me.
Yeah, I've had probably 4 or 5 guests reference that since I started this thing, and every time I hear it, I'm like, man, I'm getting better at it, but it's a work in progress.
Read the book Essentialism. George McCoon, or something like that. Essentialism. That book. Yep. Eliminating the non-essential in your life and focusing on the things that truly make the biggest impact. And I think you were going to possibly ask me a question, maybe what's my favorite book? And that's the one I would recommend to people. And then Simon Sinek's The Why book.
I think it's like Start with Why, right?
Start with Why. Yep. And then his newest one is Find Your Why, but I haven't fully read that one yet. But Essentialism and Start with Why, like that helps with so many things. That's like literally the first thing that sparks it. If something comes up, I kind of run it through those little filters. Why do I want to do it? And, if it's a hell yes or a hell no.
I feel like that's a great way to filter out opportunities as they come onto your plate, because you sound like you have probably a laundry list of them. So that's seems like a good system.
It comes in waves.
I gotcha. Since you already answered the question on what's your the most impactful book that you've read, what does your daily routine look like?
Daily routine. I kind of talked about it earlier, but everything starts the night before. I clean up. I set my schedule. I plan one big thing a day, and sometimes maybe it's 1 to 3. Like maybe it's push the podcast live and tackle the beginnings of a client project. But since I do work a day job, at 7 a.m. I go to work, but I get up at usually 4:30 a.m. so I can grind for an hour and a half on what matters most in the day. When I think I'm a night owl by default, but I feel like in the morning you have the most willpower, and so you can tackle those hardest tasks before you go through a whole day of being distracted and having all these things begging for your attention. It's the morning I get to just do my thing. No one else in the world is even up right now, and that's where I find I'm most productive. Then I do the day job. I put in some type of work in my 2 10-minute breaks. Maybe it's responding to people on social media. Maybe it's sending emails back to someone, or on my lunch, I'm doing some type of work. I go to the gym when I get done just to get my mind right so I'm not an asshole. The gym and fitness is very important to me. And then I go home, maybe put another hour in, maybe 2 hours, and then, chill with the wife and cats.
The wife and cats.
Yeah, wife and cats. Those are my kids.
Okay. I was going to say, don't you have kids too? But...
Nope. No kids, just cats. But those are my kids.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's an interesting comment you made about the gym. I think the last episode I released with Tommy Breedlove from Atlanta, he was talking about exercise as well. He didn't say it didn't make him an asshole, but I can definitely relate to that too. If I'm not like breaking a sweat every day, it's just like, I feel like you understand when you can tell the difference.
Mm-hmm. I like releasing dopamine. Endorphins. Yes. I need to release those endorphins. I need to feel good about myself, because it's so easy to slump into that, that person who was a victim of their circumstances growing up, that little 4th grader who got picked on and bullied. It's so easy to revert to that for me. So I need to stay in the gym. It's easier to stay up than to get knocked down and try to get back up again. So it's like I try to stay up every day feeling good, listen to some type of, self-improvement content, audiobooks, podcasts, but also I get my shit done. I schedule my day. I'm very strict with my schedule. I schedule each pocket of time in the day of what needs to get done at once. One big thing when I go to the gym, and communicate that to my wife so we're all on the same page. I
think that you got to schedule, man, because if you don't and you have a lot of shit on your plate, that time is going to end up going to like browsing Facebook or something.
If you just wing it each day. I used to be the one who winged it each day, and I never got anything done, and I was wondering why I was making minimal progress in a million directions when I just was winging it. And once I started getting more intentional about scheduling the things that mattered most, shit got done. And I like going to bed being like, damn, I feel good. I got some shit done today.
Crushed
like
it
that.
Today.
Yeah, I like that feeling. That feeling is addicting, and I want everybody to feel that way.
I'll have to send this thing over to you that I picked up. I picked this up about 2 years ago. I've been scheduling for a couple of years now, but it's reviewing your week. Take like an hour on Saturday or Sunday, and you look at where your time went. And you do like one column is what went well this week. Another column is what needs improved, and then your action items surrounding those two columns? Like, what am I going to do different this week to improve over last week?
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I have a passion planner, and it kind of breaks things down like that too. And then it has like a really more in-depth monthly review and stuff. So each day is like a quote for the day and like what went well today. But at the end of the week, I don't know if it has like that. That's pretty cool.
I found it to be helpful because it's like I used to do it at the end of the year and be like, what are my goals for next year? What am I going to do better next year? But it's like, I just
yeah.
Yeah, I just wasted a whole year, and I could have just fixed this after a week.
Yeah, it gives you kind of iterative checks on your goals.
It's been pretty helpful. So, moving on to the next question, what do you think the most important lesson that you learned from your parents was growing up?
Work ethic, hands down. Work ethic, and don't be an asshole. Like my parents have always been like the parents that welcome in all the other kids, or like if I had some friends that parents wouldn't take them to sports because it just wasn't convenient for them, like after school or early school stuff, or if people didn't have food or someone didn't have a ride, like my parents were always the people to step up and very empathetic, very sincere and always wanting to help people and be that person that can kind of be the light for someone else. So I think that kind of vibed off me, and then just they always busted their ass. My dad was always working his ass off. I know at times I know there's a time I think he had 2 jobs, and he maybe didn't have the dream job that he always wanted, but he had the job that he busted his ass for to provide for his family. And that meant a lot to me. So hard work and be kind to people. That's 2 things hands down I got from my parents.
I think those are 2 really valuable things to pass along.
I think it'll get you a long way in life too.
I mean, I've had a couple people ask me, they're like, what's your secret to networking and all this stuff? I'm like, be nice.
Don't be a dick, and be humble.
Yeah, do what you say you're going to do and be nice to people. It's not that, I mean, I don't think it's that hard, but.
No, I don't think so either.
So what was one thing that you've learned this week?
Whew.
This is always it kind of stumps a few guests. So, if you need a couple minutes, we can take a quick break and bring it back.
That's a good one. I like that. Okay, so one thing that I learned this week that I'm really learning more and more about, and it comes back to essentialism and hell yes and hell no, is that I've learned that I need to look ahead at my calendar more before saying yes to something, even if it is a hell yes, because I've gotten myself into quite a pickle in October and early November with kind of overlapping commitments. And I've learned to look ahead more and forecast things and be more reasonable with my time. If I think someone's going to take this amount of time, it's going to take 3 times that amount of time. So look ahead before saying yes, because sometimes I'm guilty. When I get those hell yes, I'm like, yeah, let's do it right here. That day works, that time. Perfect. So, yeah, I need to look ahead at my schedule.
It sounds like you might be a bit of an optimist too on your ability to get stuff done.
Oh yeah, I think I can do everything in the world. I have this Superman hero syndrome, and I've had it ever since high school. Like I'm a wizard at piling shit high up on my plate, and I always get it done, but my sanity suffers, and in the past relationships have suffered. So this week especially has been an eye opener on watching what I do when I schedule. I think that's a better way to put it. Stop being so optimistic.
Yeah. I think it doesn't hurt to be optimistic, but it's when it's like when you said that Superman syndrome thing, because they're like, oh, I don't know if we can get that done. They're like, no, we're gonna get it done. I'm gonna do it. And then you're like, oh shit.
And then I stayed up so late on Tuesday running through my mind like, oh my God, I can't believe I said yes to this, but then that's overlapping with that, and then this is due that day, then I'm flying out of town this day, coming back, and I'm flying out again in a couple of days from that. Yeah, I lost sleep over it the other night, and I'm like, wow, I gotta stop doing this shit. So a self-awareness week. So being optimistic is good, but having an element of realistic in there too is important.
Right. So if anybody wants to find any of your stuff, check out any of your artwork, anything like that, where would they be able to find that at?
I live at perspective-collective.com. Like that's where you can find the blog, you can find the podcast, you can find my social media stuff there. I think that's just the hub of where I live. Otherwise, if you want just the podcast, that's at perspectivepodcast.com or wherever podcasts live.
Yeah. Overcast or whatever app.
Overcast, yeah, Stitcher, all that shit. But
Yeah. Well, Scotty, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show today. I mean, I feel like I learned a lot just from sitting here and talking with you, and I had a lot of fun. Would you like to leave any message for our audiences before we sign off? Our audience before we sign off?
This is how I sign off on my podcast, and I want to encourage you to keep showing up, keep putting in the work, and keep creating. You got this.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this week's show. If you'd like to check out any of Scotty's work, go ahead and head over to Perspective Collective or perspective-collective.com, or check out his podcast, Perspective Podcast, on iTunes. You can find both of those in the show notes. I'm sure you'll be pretty happy with a lot of Scotty's stuff, as he's a very talented artist. Now, on another note, if you'd like to receive blog posts, other podcasts, guides, maybe some other forms of content and rambling from myself and others over here at Helix Academy, go ahead and head over to helixacademy.co and sign up for our newsletter. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Trevor Carlson, and I look forward to you tuning in next week.